All right, let's go ahead and jump right into it. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode, or the first episode in a while, of Vibe Theory. With me tonight is a special guest. We've got JSTNKCE here. He is a synth guru, a sound designer, music producer, musician. He's awesome, man, and I'm so excited to have him on here. We're gonna be messing with the OB6 tonight, and I'm gonna just go ahead and hand it over to him, man. Let's go ahead and welcome in.
Okay, guys, what's up? This is JSTNKCE. Just letting you know, happy to come over here and join Chemist, my good friend. He's gonna be playing at my show, my upcoming takeover over at Art Bar LA. And we're sitting down here at the OB6, which is by Sequential Circuits and Tom Oberheim, two of the synth gods of our generation, or in fact, any generation for that matter. And we're going to, get to business with this guy. It's a 6-voice polyphonic all-analog synthesizer, and let's see what we can cook up. Back to you, Chemist.
Let's go. And, of course, you always got to forget something, so ignore the fact that this says stream test or whatever the hell. So y'all know it's just basic bitch ass moves. So all right, let's go ahead. We're gonna just jump in, and for now we're just gonna have some fun, you guys. And right now we're inside of Ableton. We're just gonna groove, see what happens. We were having some fun earlier, man, so I'm really excited. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just let the good times roll here. All right, let's get it. This fool said 2013 is calling. Bitch, if you want to go, I got jokes for your whole career. Don't you dare. Fucking rejectamine out here. I appreciate you joining us, man. If you're just joining us, welcome in. Appreciate you guys being here. I'm here with JSTNKCE. We are vibing with the OB6. Feel free to hang back, relax, keep all arms and legs inside of the car at all times. Let's get it. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a good time so far. Oh man, thank you guys so much again for kicking it with us here. Once again, I'm Chemist. This is Just In Case, and we are here vibing with the OB6. And you guys, honestly, I couldn't be more hyped for the crossover between worlds here. So I love being able to pull samples and things like Serum into this sort of equation. So yeah, man. So I think we're just gonna go ahead and keep rocking. Thank you guys again. Appreciate you guys hanging with us here, bro. Let's get it going. Let's keep it going. honestly, man, this synth is so cool. Like, guys, welcome in again. Thank you. If you're just joining us, welcome to it. Justin Case and I are here in the studio. We're vibing with the OB6, and honestly, we've just been having a really good time here. And like this synth, like how important has this synth been like in a part of making your music?
I would say it's a massive part. So honestly, I've been doing production for about 8 years now. I started out with some pretty basic synthesizers and then finally upgraded to a Hydra synth, which is really my other key piece of equipment. And the contrast of having an analog piece of equipment along with what is mostly a digital engine, you get the same effect with having an analog as well as a soft synth. And you get this really beautiful contrast of color of that really crisp, sharp digital sound against that really warm, glowing analog. And it totally shifted the way I produced, the way I can write, the way I can do call and response. It was a complete game changer. Back to you, buddy.
Dude, that's incredible. I completely feel the same way. That's really what hypes me up. I love seeing the blend of two worlds. I mean, collide. Obviously, the digital landscape has the analog front to thank for honestly any of its successes. And there's, for us with the kind of the ears to hear it, right? And really just those of us, especially as producers, we're also hyper fixating on stuff like this. But there is an inherent like quality difference to something like Serum here, which is my favorite, my go-to synth for everything, especially if you've ever seen me produce music, you guys know. But it's, for me, it's so perfect because of the kind of music that I like to make. But bringing in this analog like element, it's such a nice blend of contrast, but after a while they seem less like contrast and just kind of points of balance, honestly. I mean, I don't know if that's redundant but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know, man. It's really cool, man. I don't get the chance to jam with these kinds of things too often. So also, I wanted to maybe take a second to talk about the importance of sound design. So this is something I feel like a lot of us as producers, we tend to, I think it's easy to get stuck in a box. And for those who want to branch out and kind of, I guess, sculpt their own, what I like to call like sonic identity, right? It can sometimes be like an intimidating process because there's so many technical aspects to learning a synthesizer, right? Like when you put yourself back into someone's shoes who hasn't even ever really looked at much of like this, and especially when someone comes from like a musical background, it can be a little daunting. So, but I think when one starts to dive into that field of sound design, you start to realize that a lot of this is much simpler than we, I think, give it credit for. And I think a few key things, just a few simple things, of simple points of understanding as regards to signal flow can really, really help make or break your experience with any synthesizer. So how, I mean, without sounding too obvious, right? Like how important has sound design been to you in making music, and when do you take the time to sound design versus, maybe getting compositional or is trying to write something, right? So yeah, love to know your thoughts.
Okay, so I mean, for me, being a sound designer, it was always a core of what I was really interested in. I think most of the great artists that we can think of, they have a particular sound in such a way that you can hear when a Deadmau5's new tracks, or even, even Martin Garrix, who's maybe not my style, but when he comes out with a song, his character. It's his song. When Skrillex comes out with a new song, it's Skrillex. And that's because of their sound design. It's not necessarily their composition or even maybe the samples that they're using, but it's because of the unique sonic characters that they're using to characterize their sound. I call it a sonic fingerprint, because the same way a fingerprint is unique to you, your sound design should be unique to you. As far as the way sound design has impacted my producing, the way I approach producing typically is in mainly two manners, which is, either I create a sound that then inspires a song, or I create a song ignorant of the sounds, as in I just write the composition using as basic of soft synths as I can, knowing that I'm going to then cycle those out for actual sound designed sounds, either whether they be in a soft synth or using my hardware equipment. I tend to use my hardware equipment more because I do mainly live shows, so using soft synths isn't as practical in terms of being able to perform it live and all the kind of later post-production effects. That's just due to the nature of my live performances. But generally speaking, I like to approach in those two different ways. And a great way that I achieve contrast in my songs is I'll do 50-50. I'll create the starting or the writing, the composition for a song without ever touching any sound design. This is just using basic kind of, okay, I know I'm going to use a pulse here. I know I'm going to use, something with a long release here or a long decay. All right. And it could be the most basic sounds. Sounds that being said, I have made in Serum, for example. Then I'll get like maybe 20% of the writing in. I'll go in and I'll do the exact opposite. I'll create a really cool sound playing over that original writing, but completely just based on the sound design. And then I'll create the call and response of something that was driven by writing and then something that was driven by sound design. And my call and response will be, maybe something that focuses on chords and then maybe a cool little lick. That could be the writing element. And then I'll contrast it by coming back to something that is chorally based on the sound design, that being like some cool LFO sweep from high to low frequency along with like a bass buzz in the background. And that gives me that contrast and that character in my writing. So that way I never really get stuck in any particular writing spot. Sometimes we get caught up in our writing and we're so focused on like, oh, what to write next. Well, I mean, a lot of the greatest songs in my experience have either a simple arpeggiation or even just a simple bass hold with some really cool LFO frequency sweep. And that can be enough to then contrast the main part that you've been focusing all your writing on. So that's how I use sound design in my writing.
Dude, I love that. I especially loved the way you phrased sonic fingerprint. I think that was really cool. I think that's something. I think that is something that is a bit of a balance between you chasing your sound and also your audience telling you how you sound and what you sound like, which I think is the fun part. It gives it that element of variability, I guess, right? And the other cool thing I loved about what you said was like you can do so much with like so little. Some things are just like an arpeggiation, and like some of your favorite music is literally just like a couple of notes maybe being sequenced. And I mean, literally, like, dude, the dead mouse pluck is so infamous. And guys, like, that is a matter of 3 knobs on most synths, and it's so, I think one thing that is kind of interesting I just thought of right now, how like when you get a new synth or any synth really and you see the presets, and you kind of have to think to yourself, whoa, these are so, you think to yourself, dude, these are so complicated. Like I have to, whenever I go to make a synthesizer or a patch rather, like I have to make it like as complex as these guys did, and I swear to God, like that is so not true. Like some of the coolest patches I feel like I've made, including even in this little jam, are just simple sawtooth waves with a little bit of filter and a little bit of saturation, so a little dry, but like it's you can get so much done with so little. And I like the simple stuff too because you can paint. It's like painting with colors, right? It's like you could paint over a less complex, like the more complex your wave is on the, or rather your instrument is that you're messing with, whether it's a preset or an init patch, the more harmonics that are at play, and the more harmonics, the less headroom for other things to be able to do things. So it's always kind of like a, I don't know if I'm using this word right, but like a precarious or a precocious sort of balance between like wanting something to sound good and, placing it. Like I feel like it's important to decide the objective of the instrument, when you're sound designing. So let me ask you, what is your favorite thing to sound design? Like I always love looking at like making different patches are kind of like making different instruments. I love that way of looking at synthesis and like sound design. You're literally sculpting your own instruments, your own your musical device, whatever, like you're from the point of vibration upward. And there's so many different ways we can shape these sounds into different instruments, like with plucks. That's literally what that's a pluck sound. It's such an easy motion, and so that's one of my favorite things to do because it's so simple. What is your favorite kind of instrument or sound design? Do you have a particular one? What do you usually go to, if any?
Well, so the nature of when you're using hardware is that you really use each instrument based on the sound you're going to kind of go for. So as opposed to using Serum, which is so powerful and kind of so broad spectrum, we can accomplish almost any kind of non-organic sound. Now it can struggle a little bit with more organic sounds, but like, for example, when I use a Serum, I'm doing exactly what you're doing, like really clean, tight, very kind of saw wave plucks. Those sound so good. For example, when it comes to anything like really low bass or sub, there's really no synthesizer, at least hardware synthesizer, that's meant for that. I always use Serum for my low end. For my deep lows and my nice sub plucks, it's just a much smoother, better profile and overall, algorithm for creating those. When it comes to hardware, it's a little bit more toned about what the synth does. For example, this is an analog synth, and so all of its power and its strength is going to come from that color and that grit. It's really hard to dial it into a wave that it's going to make it sound like a digital synth. For example, my other synthesizer, which is an ASM Hydra synth, it is a digital engine using virtual analog, or essentially a hybrid engine that allows you to use more analog filters on top of a digital engine. Now, that means that it's going to be harder, but it is possible to push it into the range of this. But you're never going to get that warmth and that color you get out of a true analog. So when it comes to sound design, it's really more like I use different synths for different sound designs. With this one, I really like the growl and the bite. What's beautiful about it is if you put this thing in, kind of like what you're talking about, that precariousness of kind of balancing the sounds, is that this guy, for example, this can never start your song. It's too powerful. Like, you start with this synth and there's nowhere to go. Typically what I like to do is I like to stagger, where I'll start with a soft synth, then I'll move into my Hydra synth, which again is like a virtual analog / hybrid, and then you end up for your big finale or your later more powerful part of the song, you bring in the analog, because almost nothing can really top this analog. I also have a Moog, and that's really more of a baseline synth. That may be the only thing that can kind of come after this guy. So as a rule of thumb, I don't have a particular type of sound that I like to sound design on each instrument, but let me show you an example. So
Please, yeah.
There's a couple different sonic profiles you can really dial in with this thing.
And while you do that, I'm gonna.
Dial tone effect really well. It's still got a lot of warmth and color. Like I said, moving into that true digital sound is where you want to go to something like a hybrid engine, kind of like the Hydra synth, or staying in Serum. But you get this beautiful warmth kind of pluck to it. Now, if we take off our arpeggiation, the nice thing about these guys is basically having the hands on knobs allows you to really kind of walk across the keyboard, find your sweet spot. Something I always recommend to people that are really going to be using more soft synths, which is most bedroom producers these days, and let's be honest, most producers these days, is if you have any MIDI controller of any kind, go ahead and go into Serum, and right on your little plugin window, right to your right, there's a little tiny tool button. It looks like a little wrench. You click on that guy, and you can assign any down there, bottom left.
Yeah, let me, so that these guys can see. Let's.
You know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
right?
I see here.
So yeah, we're gonna go to the bottom left.
Bottom left.
Right down to your Serum box.
Sorry, my mouse is.
That's okay.
Acting up. Okay.
Not in Serum. Bottom left.
Oh, bottom left of Ableton.
No, yeah. Where Serum was open. Go back to your Serum window.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom left. See right there, right at the top right corner of the little box. It's got a tool mark. Click that.
Sorry. Are we talking about this one? No, that's the. Yeah, go ahead.
So
go
watch.
ahead. Yeah.
You go like this. See, and it says configure.
Yeah.
So now anything you affect on here, anything you click on here, if you turn a knob, it will assign it to that knob. So that way, what you can do is you can essentially play Serum like it was a hardware synth. What I highly recommend is you assign 2 different effects in Serum, any 2 you pick, any knob, it could be your wavetable, it could be your cutoff rate. You assign 2 to 2 different knobs and then just play with them just like you would in a hardware synth. Instead of trying to use your eyes or your automation, use your fingers. Feel out where those sounds best belong. Like on a hardware synth, which is essentially the same process, I've got the frequency cutoff over here, and I've got our frequency rate on the LFO over here. So what happens is, I'm going to put a hold on. And it allows me to kind of sweep across our different frequency ranges and really dial in and that allows us to kind of craft weird sounds. And I guess with synthesis, in my opinion, when you're going for more of a analog approach, it's more about discovery than it is about determination. It's more about like, oh, I want to make exactly this, and so I'll do exactly that. That is something we tend to do more in soft synths due to the nature of their kind of absolute control, their kind of brutal tightness that we usually find ourselves locked into, which is a great contrast, but just something to consider when you go into synthesis and even messing around with Serum. Try assigning a couple of functions to a couple of different knobs and just turning them. See where you end up. Back to you, Chemist.
Awesome, dude. That was amazing. Thank you so much for that, bro. The possibilities are endless with synths, and honestly, it's incredible what you can do with when you know a couple of things as far as like what certain parameters do, what certain routing does. And I feel like if you can understand how to craft a certain couple of sounds, it really opens the synth to a lot of again, not to be redundant, but like possibilities, in the sense that you have like a controlled sense of creativeness, you know. And it is important to experiment, but I this is the one area where I feel like it takes both sides of the brain to come together, because there is a somewhat cerebral understanding to synths, in that you got to understand a little bit about what is happening to sound waves, or like in wave synthesis, what's going on, what is happening to the signal from the oscillator out. What is an oscillator? What is it doing? Why is it important? Why, you know, and why are these sections all sectioned out like this? You know, when you understand the general layout of a synth, and when you can navigate through it, and most synths are very similar, if not the same, when it comes to general parameters, because, you know, sound is made pretty much the same way. But when you understand how to go from one point to another, you can experiment as much as you want without feeling like this sucks. Like, you're obviously going to go through moments where you're like not completely confident in yourself, but more often than not, you end up finding a sort of happy other side. Like, there's a sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. But when you're doing it without any sense of where signal is moving, you'll quickly find yourself making a bunch of just not so pleasing noise, and you won't know how to get out of it, more importantly. And I think, you know, the point of learning wave synthesis is also to enhance your understanding of learning how to work a synthesizer. I feel like they're one and the same, you know. So producers, don't be afraid to dive a little bit into the technical, scary stuff. Okay, like it's a two. In my opinion, it's two sides of the brain that need to work together. And in my opinion, you know, what I recommend to folks asking about getting into this world usually is separate the two activities at first. You know, take some time to learn sound design and learn your synth, right? And then other times, put that to the side and just make cool shit, right? You know, you don't want to always be necessarily stuck in creative mode and then trying to introduce a technical thing while you're in creative mode. That's where things get messy. I feel like writer's block is introduced very quickly in that.
Get lost in the sauce.
Oh, don't get lost in the sauce, ladies and gentlemen. It is as simple as that. That sauce can be pretty saucy. It's no joke, bro. Like, for real. So, hell yeah, man. This has been awesome, man. I think what I want to do here for these last few minutes, I want to just take a second to here. This time I am gonna bring us over to. I want to kind of take a second to talk about gear. because I feel like everybody's a little different, is what they like to hear, what they like to rock. I kind of want to ask you a little bit about your setup. Obviously, you got this beautiful synth here. What other hardware synths do you like to use? And for, kind of to touch on what you were explaining earlier, like you use certain synths for certain characters, and certain objectives. What other gear are you rocking here to really make the most out of your sessions? Can you kind of give us a little overview of what you got going on?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I have a decent kind of slew of synths. I've got a Juno, one of the Juno modules, the boutique Roland ones. It really handles any kind of classic Juno sounds I want, allows me to kind of program them in, which I love for its sequencer and arpeggiator. And then my main two synths are going to be the ASM Hydra synths, like I talked about, as well as the OB6. Those are kind of my main contrast. Then for my percussion, I'm usually running Roland MC101, which is kind of one of their smaller, more powerful groove boxes. It runs their I can't remember. It's like a Xeno engine or something crazy, but it's basically their modern synthesis engine. It actually has 4 different instruments in one. Each one can be assigned either a drum, which you can assign all the instruments in those drum loops or those kind of drum patches, and then sound design each one as you like, or you can assign a synthesizer to all 4 of those layers. And then on top of that, I usually run my Moog Subsequent 25, which is really just a remake of the Sub Fatty, and then I run that through an Old Blood Noise Endeavors reverb, which gives it a lot of color and kind of space. Helps fill up those audio spaces when you're using kind of more stabby sounds on your synths that aren't going to have as much reverb. So you got to think about when you do live sets. When I perform live, I can do either a computerless, DAW-less kind of setup, which is what I'm going to be doing this weekend over at the LA Synth Expo in Glendale. Nice. But a lot of times when I'm doing my actual like official show, I will do a combination of the both. But for most of the song, I'm going to be running it's a Motu 128, which is just a 5-pin MIDI, basically bus system that allows me to run a bunch of MIDI data from my DAW as well as play live along with it. So I'm essentially doing live jamming and sound design over certain triggered parts on my certain synths. So when I do my live show, it's usually just a 4-synth setup. Sometimes I also bring in my Mini Nova, which I use as a vocoder. But like I said, it just really depends. Usually nowadays with my production, it's usually MC101 handling percussion. Again, I love the ability to do that really in-depth sound design on every single drum hit, as well as kind of use the different scatter effects that are loaded up in that guy. And then I'm going to be handling most of my kind of more powerful color, longer hits. That's going to be mostly done in the OB6. A lot of my kind of tighter, more plucky sounds I want to handle with my ASM Hydra synth. It's got great onboard effects, really nice reverb and delay, which really gives you some spacey kind of ambiance. And then finally, for my big kind of fat bass rips, I'm going for the Moog with that little subtle reverb on it. And that combination allows me to achieve the equivalent to like a finished track sound, but doing completely live. That's another thing when you're doing live performances, no MIDI sequencing in terms of literally firing with an APC-40, but actually live sound design and kind of live production. You need at least 4 instruments to really carry the weight. I tried it with 1, it doesn't really work. I tried it with 2, it kind of works. 3, you're getting there. 4 is when it starts to feel like a real song. So that's kind of a look into the equipment I use. And then from interface, I'm running a Scarlett 18i20. I like that low latency, as well as the fact that I'm not doing any vocals with effects currently. So it kind of just brings everything together and sweetens it. And that's what I'm running for kind of my live setup and my production gear.
So, dude, that's sick. So you have like 4 different synths that you rock?
When I perform live.
When you perform, like, good Lord. That's awesome, man. Yeah, you definitely have to take some time with each one of them. Like, I bet, I'm willing to bet money that each one of those was not like an overnight decision. Like, each one of those synths, you probably spent a good 3 years on each synth. Yes. Good God.
I always spend about at least 2 years after I buy something before I'll perform with it or even release it in production. For example, the more complicated the synthesizer, the harder it is to use. This thing took me the longest. I was already pretty much kind of a master of synthesis in terms of hardware synthesis. And I mean, this thing took me almost 3 years before I was really comfortable using it on stage. I mean, this thing has over 1,000 patches. And I've sound designed the first 500 of them. So, and that, I mean, I spend sometimes 2 days on one patch. It took me 3 years just to fill it. as well as get used to the sound design. Again, the more complicated the synthesis and the more complicated the synthesizer, the more touch and more careful and more particular the way you have to actually handle each patch and that synthesizer in particular. So that's kind of a glimpse into the level of time and effort it takes to dive into hardware that is complicated.
Sure. Yeah. Geez, man. What I was gonna ask? Oh, yeah. What about at home when you're producing, when you're working on music in the studio? Do you what kind of monitors are you using? Do you have a particular pair of headphones you go for? Do you reference between monitors? Like what's your at home production setup look like generally?
So my at-home production setup, again, still running the Scarlett as my main driving unit as far as an interface goes. But I use the same ones you're running, which are the DT990 Pros, the 250 ohms. I got 2 pairs of those for if me and another producer want to use them open back for kind of keeping that ear fatigue down. Then I also run the Audio-Technica M60X if I want to hear a more closed back. I do find them a little bit less accurate overall, but it's a good example of what maybe more of your listeners are going to be hearing through, as well as the closed back is great for tracking vocals and stuff where you have a live mic and you don't want that feedback coming from your open back headphones. So that is something I also consider. As far as my speakers, I'm running Mackie, what are they? XR824s, which is their carbon fiber headed big 8-inch driver speakers. And they sound fantastic. You know, I really like the sound of them. They're really warm. Maybe a little bit less color would be good there time to time, but that's probably more of a room treatment issue, if we're being honest. And overall, I will use all 3. When I'm producing, I literally have all 3 hooked up. I typically will be working with things mainly starting on the speakers because a lot of sound design, you really need that stereo imaging. You really need the effect and the effects themselves of what they sound like in open space in terms of how that decay is reflecting off walls, how it is interacting with the actual compression in the room. Then what I'll do is I'll actually jump to my open backs and I'll leave my speakers running with the open backs running. And I actually get a very different effect than if I just use my open backs by themselves. And then finally, once in a while, I'll throw the other guys on, those Audio-Technica M60Xs, and that will just give me a kind of a great 3-part example. Sound design, much like engineering, is very particular. You know, a sound may sound great on open speakers, and then sometimes you put on your DT990s, and all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that sounds kind of like too tight or a little bit too harsh. And bouncing between the different audio sources really helps me see, just like an engineer would, the different color and character in different environments. So that's kind of an example of how I run my audio.
Nice, dude. Oh, man. Listen, I really, really appreciate all that. And, you know, I'm sure our listeners do. And, guys, I thank you so much again, everybody, for jumping in tonight. I think that's a great note to call it. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Devin, thank you so much. Just in case here, ladies and gentlemen, do you want to tell them anything about any? I know you mentioned you have a show coming up. Do you have any releases? Anything? Tell us. Any cool stuff coming in the future?
Well, I got a couple of singles that are going to be coming out pretty soon, as well as got a show over the LA Synth Expo on Saturday. My set's at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. The show starts at 2 p.m. It's the LA Synth Expo, so it's got all the new gear. They're going to have raffles for gear. It's over in Glendale. You can find it on Instagram, online, anywhere. And I'm going to be doing a fully live DAW-less set, meaning no computer, as well as the show on August 16th at Art Bar LA, where I'm doing a full takeover. I'll be building the whole lineup and headlining, and then we're going to have my boy Chemist over here. He's going to be shredding there as well. So please feel free to come through and check out. It's going to be pretty crazy. Lots of original artists with their own original music. And I think that's enough said for tonight.
Dude, once again, thank you guys so much for joining us. I think I'm gonna make this a thing now. This has been a lot of fun. Honestly, this was his idea, so I got to give credit where credit is due. Man, this was super cool. I can really see really see us having some good times here. So once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, see you guys later.